Hey everybody, welcome to the Inside Tabletop GMG channel. If you're wondering why there's now a separate YouTube channel for Inside Tabletop, it's because the algorithm, as of 2025, no longer responds to subscriber counts and or view counts for putting things up in the algorithm, and my content's getting buried. That means that GMG is basically collapsing financially and subscriber and view count wise, and I now have to play around with the new, after 20 years, and different AI generated version of content creation, which tailors specific kinds of content because the AI can't understand how a channel can enjoy more than one thing. And we're creating 5 new YouTube channels for you to subscribe to. Please subscribe, because if you don't, they can't be monetized and this whole enterprise fails immediately. Inside Tabletop is, of course, the series in which I talk to people who work inside the gaming industry about working in the gaming industry to give you guys some insight behind the curtain into what it's like working in this world, making money, making games, making art, and generally surviving by the skin of our teeth to bring you guys the entertainment that you so crave. So please subscribe. I'm going to be reposting all the previous Inside Tabletops here for you to enjoy, and new ones in the future. So sit back, relax, let the people chat, and holler at your boy. Well, welcome to space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me. You're having studio blow-ups, so I'm excited that you're going to have something like this hopefully soon. You can have a nice space to spread out in.
Nothing nearly as big as this.
Yeah.
No. I'm gonna. My plan is this has been a plan for a while, but coming this summer, I'm going to start working on kind of like heading back to the basement, because that's where I started. I started
with the one hang light.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now and the thing is, I haven't been able to work in my normal studio for like the last month because they're refurbishing the windows.
Yeah, I saw that video you had where they were all
the tape over it.
Before you went to Denmark.
Before I went to Denmark. And so I've been basically filming a lot of stuff in my home office, which is in the sunroom, which is bright, but then there's times when all of a sudden it's like partly cloudy and then bright and then partly cloudy and then bright, and messes with it. So that's its own thing. Yeah. But my plan is to move back down to the basement just because it's so noisy downtown. So
it's nice having there's two things that's nice about having an outside space from home. The first one is you don't feel like you're at work when you're home. Yeah. Because I often feel like I'm at work when I'm home and I'm editing and stuff like that. And then the second thing is a controllable space. So if the controllable space is not working out for you, I can understand why you want to move back.
Only thing I don't have under my control probably at home is going to be cat rampages. Like you'll hear
that
them
sells
run.
Though, man. That sells. That's content.
Yeah,
that's content, baby. Let the cats run. People love cats on the internet. I don't say that.
No, that's true.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Inside Tabletop. I am here, as you might see, with Uncle Atom from Tabletop Minions.
Absolutely.
And you're here in St. Catharines and shot me a message saying, hey, I'm 5 minutes away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Doing stuff with Army Painter. Can I come by and see the studio and hang out? So I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
This is like, we usually see each other at conventions. The odd convention that I stick my head into.
Last time was Adepticon, yeah.
It was Adepticon. But it's cool to get to actually sit down and talk industry stuff with you. Because
absolutely.
Usually we don't have a chance because we're running around like trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
At conventions, it's hard to actually show up and actually hang out with people and just get to like chill and be one-on-one.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I like to go to Adepticon during setup, because the night of setup at Adepticon, I shouldn't say this to everyone here because you're just going to try and creep into this.
Well, maybe it'll change.
It's just vendors usually. It's just all of like the industry people. And that night we all get to sit in the lobby and just kind of decompress and commiserate and bitch about being all sole proprietors and independent contractors and people who have to pay too much taxes after have to collect their own tax money from the government.
Yeah.
But so it's good to actually get to hang out with you because we don't usually get a chance to do this when we're actually in the same physical area. Yeah,
generally it's just really busy. Obviously, like we got to hang out a little bit at Adepticon this year, but then you left early.
Oh, I took off on Thursday.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
My social battery's done. Social battery's done. I meant to spend an hour there Thursday morning, but when they opened the doors, it's so slammed. I just walked through. Getting across the hall is a ton of work. It was
nuts there this year.
Ended up having 700 conversations between like a 200-foot walk. Basically.
Oh yeah, no, that's been the thing that's been for the last couple of years is that I've had people that I know that will come to Adepticon and things like that. And then we'll be trying to get from like, I want to show them something in a different part of the place. And then it's like, got to stop and you got to stop and you got to stop. And I'm absolutely glad to
it's so
talk
flattering.
It's
so
awesome to talk to people. It's just that you have to take that into consideration. Like, I have to go to the concession stand. It's going to take me a while
I need
to
to
get
pee
there.
really bad.
Exactly.
I need to pee so bad.
Yeah, exactly.
But this person's so nice, and I really want to talk to
Exactly.
them. But
Yeah.
I'm
So,
dying right now.
so I've got a little bit of a camel thing going on, so I can take it longer. But yeah, no, I've got friends that are just like,
I can feel my back teeth floating. I'm
Right.
just trying to get to the bathroom real fast.
Yeah.
There's been, if anyone was at Adepticon where I was like, I really need to pee, I'm so sorry, I have to go.
That was not a trick. You
that was
really
not
needed
a trick.
to pee.
I really needed to pee. I needed to get out of there. But yeah, I wanted to talk about a bunch of things with you today. But basically, you and I sitting in like a unique position where we can have this conversation that's hard to have with anybody else, really.
Sure.
Where we interact with tons of different companies, we interact with tons of different people inside the industry, and we get to have kind of a holistic view of how things are going.
Well, and we're also both, product creators to some degree.
Both writers,
exactly.
games and things.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in. I guess what I would say is our fingers are in many pies.
It's true.
And so you're an interesting person to have this conversation with about the current state of the industry, like where we're at right now, because we're in a very you and I represent the generation. This is going to sound terrible. That's leaving.
Sure.
Like we're the generation that was created during the 80s and 90s, that spent all the money during the aughts, during the biggest growth period of this industry.
Right.
And now we're kind of the high fidelity, grumpy old men in the record store, basically, talking about feeling underappreciated for our wisdom and talking about the way things used to be.
Back in my day.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like this band. You probably never heard of it.
Right. Yeah.
And so having kind of like just to sit and think about how things are and where things are going, I thought it'd be interesting. So maybe we can just start at Adepticon, because one of the best places to see everything and kind of like poke at it is Adepticon, because everybody kind of hangs their shingle there.
Sure.
Everybody shows up in the tabletop wargaming industry, at least. But people are showing up in other industries now too.
Yeah. Somewhat.
And they show off whatever their wares are for that coming big sales period in the summer. And I stayed, I was there for 8 hours basically when it was open.
Right.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the what, how, and why. Like, who's showing off what, where the companies kind of sit, because the one thing I did notice is there are not a lot of mid-sized game companies there. There's a lot of small game companies, a lot of independent creators, a lot of one-man shows in a basement, and there's a lot of big companies, right, with either brand managed IPs,
right,
or workshop, right, which is basically an IP brand managing company at this point.
Yep.
The amount of licensed products that they do.
Yeah.
There's not a lot in between. Like, the closest thing I can think of is maybe Parabellum. They have a lot of staff now. Corvus Belli was there, but they're mid-size and they hadn't shown up the same way.
From what I know about Parabellum, though, they've got when Parabellum first came up on the scene, I was at the first place I had ever heard of them. I was at the Gamma trade show. I think it was 2018, and it was in Reno, Nevada at that time. And I was there. We had a booth for Game 4, the app that we were working on and all that kind of stuff. And so we were there, and there were these guys that were just not across, but down in a little bit. And they had this good-sized booth filled with miniatures, big displays, tons of graphics, all this stuff. And I had never heard of these guys before. And I'm like, what's going on? And so I went over and I talked with them. And they gave me a media packet type.
Yeah, I got that. I got the same one. It was this beautiful. It was a beautiful media packet. Yeah.
If you look in there, there's a thing, and I forget the exact mention, but it was basically talking about how, in the way I translated it, was that somebody's grandpa's a big Greek oil guy.
Yep.
And someone's grandson was like, I want to start a game company. So.
And overnight, they had all the money.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. No. That's the way the world works.
Yeah.
And they, initially they were producing stuff that was cool, but I always thought the molds were probably being a lot of work because they were real. The first molds were real soft, not the plastic. The plastic was hard, but nothing was sharp and detailed.
The detail was really rounded.
Right, and that's just by spending less money on molds.
Yep.
And now the stuff that they've been putting out the last 2-3 years is amazing. Yeah.
And they have a full out product line. So what I would define a mid-range company is if you walk in to see what their product offer is, you get more than 2 choices.
Yeah.
And you could start with their initial product offer of Starter Set or whatever and get lost for months in whatever you're at on stuff. Right? So I would qualify them. I qualify Corvus Belli.
Yep. And Corvus has been around forever. But,
for 20 years almost now. Yep. And I can't.
What do you think about Catalyst? Where are they?
Are
they big enough? Or
here's the thing is, Catalyst doesn't make games. Catalyst is a steward of an old game that they rent off Tops.
Sure.
And technically, they don't even make miniatures because Ironwind Metals has the rights to make miniatures.
Well, they don't make the plastic ones, do they?
They make cards for Alpha Strike that come with miniatures. Is what Catalyst makes.
Well, but the plastic miniatures, aren't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
Are they
yeah,
producing
but you're buying
those?
the cards for Alpha Strike. So Catalyst makes expansions for BattleTech.
Yeah, I suppose.
But not technically miniatures. It just happens that those Alpha Strike cards come with miniatures.
That's weird.
It's a very weird loophole of who owns what in the BattleTech world. The BattleTech world's a weird place, man.
Yeah.
But technically, Ironwind Metals makes the official BattleTech miniatures.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I don't know if you knew that, but yeah, that's why they come with Alpha Strike cards.
Yeah.
They make an expansion for Alpha Strike that happens to come with miniatures. The miniatures are tokens that go with those Alpha Strike cards.
That's crazy. Yeah. No, it's always an odd industry in my opinion, and so. But yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of like mid-range, and I think it's because partially is that it's honestly not crazy hard to get started, especially if you've got like a passion for it and are willing to work a day job to feed your family and also do a bunch of other things. Or if you're like in a lucky situation where your spouse has got a decent enough job and you get insurance that way and all that kind of stuff, especially in the States. And then you can kind of work on this sort of side gig and make this happen and see where it goes.
Side hustle, yeah.
Exactly. It becomes a side hustle. And there are people out there who can do a good enough job, I think, in that side hustle to make themselves look bigger than they are.
That's exactly it. Everybody looks the same size from their website.
Right.
That was the thing that I think people didn't think about with like a company like Privateer back when they were like the rival of Workshop. Because they're a mid-sized company, they're doing very, very well. But they didn't have 6,000 employees.
No.
They had like sub 100 employees, you know what I mean, out in Washington. And that's not, there's nothing wrong about that. But I think that the impression people get from the online presence thing, like you said, can be really surprising when then you show up to Adepticon and you're like, oh no, it's just me and my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Like she packs orders.
Yeah.
Like, that's where we're at right now. Like
as soon as that kid's old enough, he's going to start packing orders too.
He's going to make his lunch money. He's going to be all packing pictures. Cat and Cash are going to start editing 2-camera setups. This is going to be their
nice.
lunch money. It's great.
Yeah.
As soon as I don't have to do multicam editing, oh man, I have so much more free time. It's going to be incredible.
Oh yeah.
So that was the first thing that struck me. And the second thing that struck me was even the indie and small producer companies have been around for a while now.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of new blood in the mix. There was a few, like the Hive Scum guys. I love them. Like the Under the Dice guys, they were pretty, I know you're wearing
the shirt.
the podcast stuff.
Yep.
They had like just the most fun booth full of like cool little zine games and fun stuff they were making.
It with them, it completely comes from, I think, two aesthetics. One is obviously a passion, like a love for the stuff.
Sure.
And then two is that DIY aesthetic. They didn't want to look big. Like that's not what they're there to do. They don't want to look corporate or big. Yeah,
the merch table at a punk show. Like,
exactly. It's exactly what it was. And I want to see more of, to be perfectly frank with you.
That made me the happiest of anything I saw walking around.
Absolutely. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of people, especially in this day and age, your website, it's really easy to get like cool pop-ups and do all that kind of stuff. Maybe your graphics don't look all that good, but if you do have somebody that that has the ability to do a good graphic, it's $200 to build a really nice bunch of pop-ups that you can have in your booth, and people will walk up and go, "Oh wow, it's 2 people, maybe 3." You know what I mean? What was the name of the company? Enemy Spotted Games. They make Blackout. Like that stuff kind of just came out of nowhere a little bit
I'm
as
excited
well,
for them. Actually, I think they're doing some work with Austin to get miniatures and stuff made.
They already are. I bought the last
time.
Them
at DRD. Yeah.
Well, so what happened was I ordered the 2-player starter box on the website in the beginning part of the year, maybe the end of 2023, and it shipped. And I'm 90 because they was all 3D printed, and I'm 98% sure it was already stuff coming from Austin at DRD. Yeah. And then I picked up 2 more models at Adepticon from them. Sweet. And actually they're going to be vending at my little tiny convention.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. Coming up in the beginning of June.
Yeah, Austin and I are having a call tomorrow. Actually, we're going to talk about the Blackout stuff too.
Yeah. It's I first came across it, I want to say, I think it was either at Nova last year or else it was at Las Vegas Open. One of the two.
I like the Neil Blomkampy RoboCop sort of like aesthetic of the PMCs and all that.
Well, it's got like that. That's the thing, is it's like PMCs versus Insurgents, and I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to get into.
I don't love that,
but it's in like 2200 on a different planet. Exactly. So I'm like, okay, that's better. I'm fine with that.
But the look is near future, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
it's got that Appleseed like kind of grounded, still hard sci-fi look.
And it's also the game system. Like the book is really tiny, and I love that. And it's also a game where if you get shot, you die. I mean, it's rare that you don't. And so it's very quick, and it's really about being in cover and being like, and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to like,
cautious.
well, I still got 3 more wounds.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fine.
Being cautious in positioning. I'm excited for that because everyone loves watching me suffer when I play games.
Sure.
Anytime I can extra suffer, that seems to be their.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can understand
that. Yeah. Okay, so that being said, then, what did you think of the big companies that were there? So who would, and this is always a game I like to play.
Yeah.
And we talked about this actually off camera, but the visually speaking, just from footprint, who would you think was the biggest company at Adepticon? Not knowing anything about the industry.
Foot traffic or footprint?
Just footprint. Like who looked like they were the biggest company?
Yeah, well then I was Asmodee.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it was Asmodee and then probably Catalyst.
I was going to say Catalyst is probably close second.
Because Asmodee had if at Gen Con, they've got this massive big room that happened that's not everything, but it's a lot. The middle part of it is just vendor hall. And so when the vendor hall closes, and you know this, they bring those big kind of walls, those movable walls, and then they cut it off. Yep. And now you've got a tournament room on one side and a tournament room on the other side. One of those was just Asmodee.
Yeah.
It was Legion. It was X-Wing. It was MCP. It was the Shatterpoint. All that kind of stuff going on there. They had stuff hanging off the ceiling.
They're just their counters.
Oh, yeah.
They bring in like a UFC event.
Yep.
Commentator set.
Oh yeah, they got live streaming. They're doing the whole deal,
God.
And there's not just like guys sitting at a conference table live streaming. No. They've got backdrops and they've got like everything is like dialed in.
Yeah.
And they're spending money.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, what used to be always just Games Workshop stuff, and has Games Workshop's the only one of the vendors that stays outside of the vendor, but not out in the main hall.
Yep.
And by say hall, I mean the hall, like with the walkway. Catalyst is out in that main hallway. And they've got a big thing, and that's a big presence when you come in because you see them almost first.
It's like the best spot.
It's a great spot.
They're at the front door. Like they get more footfall than any other vendor there. And actually, especially the year before when they had the 50-foot Urban Mech outside too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where it was like, it looked like a Battletech convention. Like
exactly.
You're driving up to the Renaissance, and it's like, oh, there's a giant robot in the parking lot. This must be what this is for.
Exactly. So I was kind of surprised we didn't see that this year because it was at Gen Con too.
Apparently it was a union thing. Apparently there was a lot of like, who's going to set this up? We couldn't find a union guy that knew how to do a giant inflatable robot, so it became a problem. The specialist robot guy wasn't around.
I could see that. Yeah, he's probably on some sort of vacation.
Yeah,
but to Japan, looking at big robots over there. But yeah, so that big side hall that used to be all GW stuff, including the GW booth, a huge portion of it's Catalyst now.
Yeah,
and there's like a big, huge, giant banner that they hang up. Like you remember from the old Gen Con days. Back before it was Catalyst and it was FASA, you always hang this massive banner up that was like a shot of like Seattle from like Shadowrun.
Yep.
I still wonder if that banner is around because that thing was like 200 feet long. It was
enormous.
Monstrous.
It was wild. And also they had the battle pods this year too. So they had the big
the old battle pods came.
They refurbished them so you can get in, you can pilot a mech in these things.
They're refurbished, but I don't know that the software's
the outside's refurbished.
Yes, but the software is still very, very old.
It's exactly the same experience.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm here for it though. I love video games.
I haven't done those since. I did those at Gen Con probably 2017 or somewhere around those. I sat down. It was a bit of a nostalgia back then. And yeah, they're still running it and bringing it, which is cool. I remember when those were in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like I had friends who traveled to Chicago to go to the battle pod like place and like do it and everything like that.
Gen Con every year. They were a big deal. These I think there was 20. They're like steam tanks. There's only 20 and like only half of them work. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
like,
They're cannibalizing for parts.
They're cannibalizing for parts,
yeah.
They made them, for people that don't know steam tank lore, that was the whole thing, was there was 12 steam tanks, and when they get lost, they were never made again because Leonardo de Miragliano could only make like 12 of them or whatever.
Right, yeah.
These were the same sort of idea.
So, yeah, I would say that like between Asmodee, like GW obviously has their big honkin' booth, but they don't, and they have the big rope, they have the big Terminator in the hallway.
It almost feels like they feel like they don't need to advertise like that. Does that make sense? Because everyone's playing their games.
They used to do that though. Remember back in the day when they just stopped coming to Gen Con? Because they're like, we don't need to go to Gen Con. Yeah. And they used to do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then they were like, well, actually, maybe that's not a bad idea to maybe start doing this stuff again. And yeah, it's been interesting to kind of see how they kind of ebb and flow. And I think right now they're in, like, obviously they still go to a lot of shows and they do a lot of stuff. And they do work with the people, I'm pretty sure,
on the ground.
On the ground at Adepticon. But as a consumer, you walk in and you don't see, other than the big robot, the big Terminator, you don't, which I'm sure costs a buttload to bring over or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they have two. I hope they have one in North America and one in the UK.
I think they probably have one in Dallas
because I know they also set it up in different ways. Like they have a different.
It disassembles for sure.
Well, no, I know, but like the base, like when we were at Gen Con, they had the entire base. And when you're at, you know, the show like Adepticon, when it's in the hallway,
it's a
smaller base and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So there's that kind of thing going on. But yeah, it is interesting to kind of see that. And you're right. There's not a lot in the medium area right now. And I don't know, like, it seems like that's maybe bad, right?
So what it does for me is I'm always trying to sense vibe. And this sounds weird, but like, what are people excited about?
Yeah.
What are people talking about? There was the thing that I saw the most people excited about, weirdly, and this is purely down to marketing, was the Monument limited release of paints. There was like a new iPhone line out the vendor hall of like 150 people waiting for those paints.
Yeah.
So people excited about painting. The one thing Workshop did have set up, but it was way off upstairs to the side, is Golden Demon. So they had their Golden Demon set up, but it was kind of like you had to go to it. Like
no, it's up on the second floor over by you got to go find it.
And I don't think it's a good or bad thing necessarily. It was just interesting to me that there's like a couple people that are mid-sized in the middle, lots of like little independent vendors in the vendor hall, and also playing those independent games kind of in the halls in like the free gaming areas and stuff like that, and people setting up demos out there. Lots of people playing like a 40K tournament, lots of people playing a Age of Sigmar tournament. Lots of people sequestered over to one side playing all the Star Wars stuff. It almost felt like watching people play all the Star Wars and Marvel stuff was its own advertising, because it wasn't spread out. Like, it was all very intentional.
It was in a lump.
Yeah, you get to see all those customers be in one place and talk to all those customers in one place. And to me, that felt like a parable of where the industry's at right now, because it feels like Workshop is kind of just shotgunning in every direction. They're not super worried about their messaging. They're not super worried about trying to say, this is what we do. We make new customers. We bring people into the hobby. We develop and build our games for everybody.
It is 100% them barreling forward into new releases, and just because that's what they can advertise. That's what they can market.
Yeah.
I feel like it's hard for them to say, oh, well, you know, you can still get Chaos Rhinos, or you can still get like this, because for one thing, you kind of can't.
You kind of can't.
Right. And also it's just like, I don't know. People get excited about new stuff. And so that's what they've decided. Instead of like trying to get people excited about getting into it, they're trying to get people excited about buying into it.
And that was the microcosm to me. So we do our new release presentation. People get excited about things they cannot buy at that show.
Did you see the new release presentation?
I didn't go.
So we get there. I'm in the room, right? There's 1,000 people in this room or whatever. And they're like, okay, now nobody take any pictures or video or with your phones and all that stuff, because this is online. This is very special. And this is special for us. This is for us. Now we're going to play an hour and 12-minute video. They told us right from the get, hour 12-minute video, and I think he's kidding, and he wasn't.
Holy moly!
It just was a single video that ran for an hour and 12 minutes, where they would like show like some close-ups of a model. We never saw a model against like a white background, static. It was always like a close-up, speed ramp, smoke machine, all that kind of stuff. And they would talk about the lore, and then there would be a cut, and then it would go to 2 or 3 guys in a set from the design team or whatever, and they would talk about it for 5 minutes, and then they would go to the next one, and it just kept going for an hour and 12 minutes. People around me
watch a movie. You watch an actual movie.
People around me were falling asleep. People around me were having just full-on conversations because they didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
And it was too long by more than half. Like, it really could have been. Oh, it was not good.
Because it should have been a trailer, basically, for the 6 things that they're showing.
And the thing that, if you've ever been to one of these before, and you have, obviously, but if you've ever been to one of these things before, they show a video.
Yep.
It's maybe 2 minutes, maybe less than a minute, and then they talk about it for a while.
Yeah, they have an interactive discussion with people.
And they kind of chat and stuff like that. And the thing is that they can also then gauge when people like cheer for a thing, because by the end, no one was cheering for anything, because they just didn't care anymore. And people were getting up and leaving and all that kind of stuff. And it was so, I appreciate that they're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, but this presentation didn't work.
Yeah.
And that is also kind of a thing, because it's always on the first night. It has a tendency to sort of set a bit of a
tone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't hear really anything about it after it came out.
And
that like, I'm not saying it was a wet fart, but at the same time, it was
a really long one.
It was a really long one.
Yeah.
It was one of those like moments where you're sort of like, you're looking at the show, and it feels like some people have kind of a plan, at least what the show's supposed to be, and then the rest of it was kind of just we're here and we're going to do what we always do.
Yep.
But I don't know how that speaks to what the plan is, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so that kind of dovetails back to something I've been thinking a lot about recently, which is that the other thing I noticed is everybody at that show's getting old.
Well,
and I'm not trying to be like ageist, but
as it turns out, none of us are getting younger.
We're not.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any teenagers there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see any kids there that weren't with their parents being dragged along because dad wanted to see these tabletop soldiers. And that to me said a lot.
But I've never really seen young kids there at that show.
People in their 20s?
Gen Con sometimes. But I'm talking about like teens. It's rare to see. But
give me someone in college.
Yeah.
Give me somebody who's in college that likes Warhammer. If you live in Chicago, how many people in Chicago are first of all live in the suburbs of Chicago?
Sure.
Bajillions.
Yeah.
Right? And that means that with the 10 or 20 Games Workshop stores in the, let's say, 100-mile radius of Chicago, there weren't a bunch of teen to college age people that wanted to go to their show, their Adepticon.
I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I couldn't afford miniature games and stuff like that when I was in a teen or even in college.
Sure.
Like the first time I ever learned about Games Workshop at all was my friend had a copy of first edition Space Hulk, and we played it in like 1991. And then I would buy a miniature once in a while. I would go to a game store, but that was like literally it. Like I never really started getting into the stuff because back then there were no skirmish games as far as like the big stuff. It was all you got to play an army or you don't. And so, yeah, I've never really expected to see at a miniatures convention in general. And there have been questions about this. There's a YouTube channel called Little Wars TV.
Yep.
And,
historicals, yep.
Yeah, and it's all historicals, and they've gone to conventions and asked the same question, basically, is are historicals dying? Is everyone just aging out and croaking, you know? And the thing is that I think it's just generally an older audience. You get to a point, and now you join in, and then eventually other people age out, either through just getting older or dying or whatever. And so I don't know if it's ever going to be a really young audience, but it is
really young. I would just take 20s. Like
it would be nice to see that.
Like anybody in that age category.
But it's a really hard, let's be perfectly frank, it's a difficult, like if you were just to sell someone who's never heard about this is a hobby you should try out. You think it'd be great, where you buy this thing and then you have to open it up and you have to cut all the parts apart and you have to glue it all together and then you have to prime it and you have to paint it and all that stuff before you can start playing. It's not for everybody. And I don't want to be gatekeeper. I'm saying not everybody likes it is the problem. It's not, I want everybody to try it, but most people are not interested.
But my response to that would be a lot of the people who were there this year were also here 10 years ago and were in their 20s.
Yeah, I suppose that's possible.
So it was possible back then.
Yeah.
What's changed?
Well,
that's the thing to me. If you're 35 to 40 and you're at Adepticon this year, have you been going for 10 or 15 years? Because that means that they on-ramped in back then.
Well, you've been doing this channel about as long as I have.
Yeah, 10 years.
And you've been looking at have you been noticing your analytics?
Sliding this way.
Is it? See, because mine stays about the same. It's just, it doesn't, like there's no 13 to 17s.
There's no 13 to 17s, but I think we talk about different stuff too, which is
for sure,
right?
For sure.
There's a level of, and so here's the second part that pushes that into my brain.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would buy to become a tabletop hobbyist today. I don't know what the on-ramp is.
I made a video about that last year about how to get into wargaming these days. I made kind of two different videos. I made one about how to get into Warhammer and how that, and it's a little bit harder, obviously. And then also how to get into wargaming. And I also made a video last year about how to get into wargaming for under $100. And it's not easy. It is not easy, especially when you are seeing all the marketing of all these things coming out, and you see that, and you're like, well, that's what I want to do. That sounds awesome. Yeah, well, that's $120 right off the bat. Yeah. So,
well, and combine that with, I want to know what the popular thing is.
Sure.
So typically when you first enter into a hobby, one of the things you do when you obsessively research it, especially when you're a kid, is what's the best one? What's the one everyone's playing?
Right.
I'm going to play that one because then I'm going to have faith that this risk I'm taking is going to pay off for me.
Right.
The one that you would be able to find the most about is on the highest shelf.
Exactly.
Like
absolutely.
the highest
most
shelf,
expensive,
right?
Yeah.
It's the most expensive to get into, and when you even get their gateway product, you don't have the full experience. You have a quarter maybe of what the full experience is going to be.
I talked recently about the starter set for Warcry and how it's not really a starter set at all. It costs $10 more than the Kill Team starter set, and it comes with 2 4-person like forces. You get the Crimson Court guys in there, which are great models, and then you get some sort of, it's either 3 or 4 models that are Stormcast.
One,
and you get like 5 maybe little tiny pieces of terrain on a
the
cardstock
walls
thing,
and
you know?
stuff.
Yeah.
You get the walls and you get a cardstock mat. Yeah.
Yeah, but it costs $10 more than the one from the Kill Team where you get 2 full forces that you can pretty much run. Yeah. And so it seems like for as much push as they like to do, Games Workshop these days on getting new product, you're right. It's to the point now where it's getting harder and harder to figure out how to start, because even the starters aren't starters to some degree, you know? I used to have a viewer who would he would say, like, I would talk about the new starter like Leviathan, let's say, or you know, Indominus, and he'd be like, that's not a starter box. And I'm like, well, it's the start of the new stuff that they're making for this season. And it was pedantic a little bit to some degree. It was semantics, but it was like, you know, they come out with the starters after the big box,
and they have 3, which then causes even more confusion.
Exactly.
Because if you're a store owner, one's just going to be better.
Yeah.
And so you're going to buy 2 that are dead stock intended to get them to buy the 3rd one.
Right.
And it's like, just have one that you're proud of.
Yeah.
Like, why
just put one out there
and have a loss leader.
Yeah.
There used to be in this industry loss leader products that you intentionally made less money on because they were the gateway into just letting people try. Right. And it feels like now the impetus is on making as much money off that initial purchase as possible because they might not come back.
It's a fire and forget kind of situation.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the Age of Darkness, you know, Heresy box.
Fantastic box.
Sure. And it was like $200. And in the video I talked about it, I'm like, it's a loss leader. And people are like, they didn't lose money on it. I'm like, no, they didn't.
No.
But they made less money on it, which to them is like losing. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
They're going to sell more of these than anything else because it's a loss leader. And that will equate to the money they would have made.
I worked in camera stores back in the early 90s. And, you know, the reason you would spend $20 to buy a Polaroid camera is because the film cost $25.
That's right. Exactly.
So, yeah.
It's like you buy a new printer now just to get the ink cartridge.
Yep.
Because it's cheaper than the ink cartridge.
Exactly. Yeah.
You throw the printer away.
Yeah.
And our Mother Earth is burning.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's so strange that these two things are somehow related.
They can't possibly be related.
Nah, absolutely.
But I think that's the interesting to me is so those 3 things put together, I think add up to me a weird state of the industry where you have junior companies who are dependent upon the larger companies to create their follow-on customers.
Sure.
They will create their own customers. They will inherently, they'll go to cons, they'll talk to people, they'll give demos, fantastic, and make their own customers. But for the most part, people who find them have encountered tabletop wargaming somewhere else first. The less of those come down the chain is not great. And that's a weird spot for me where I'm watching that happen and I go, and again, I'm not trying to like doomsay.
Yeah.
But it is, if I don't know what to buy my 10-year-old for them to comfortably enter into the tabletop wargaming sphere and feel comfortable playing it, like they know what they're doing, they want to so bad.
Oh yeah.
And I want to give it to them. And I don't know what that looks like today.
Yeah. Now, are you saying that from the standpoint of a parent, or are you saying that from the standpoint of a person who's immersed in the industry and you still don't even know what to get for them? From
the point of view of a salesperson, from a point of view of someone who has been selling tabletop war games for 24 years.
Someone brings in a 10-year-old and you as the salesperson and you go,
So there's my top 3, and I'll ask you your top 3. The first one I would say is, if I was a parent and I want to take a risk on tabletop wargaming with my kid, I would sell the beginner set for Catalyst's Battletech. The 2-model beginner set's $25 US.
Yep.
Or the old one was. I'm not sure what the MSRP is right now, so don't quote me on it. But $25 US, 2 miniatures, tons of standees, terrain, a quick start guide, all the stuff to play.
Sure.
It's probably too complicated for someone not in their teens.
That would be the problem to me,
I would do the Alpha Strike box set if they're willing to do a little bit more money. Same exact experience, way more models, tons of terrain, all that stuff. $65.
Yeah.
Right? Those two are at a level that I think you could get a decent experience out of it.
And I feel Catalyst is finally in a position where they're starting to actually have stuff in stock.
Their product offer,
Because for the longest time, like, you know, I was kind of interested in Alpha Strike for a minute, and I was at a show and they had a bunch of Alpha Strike models and they were on sale. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. I could get this and this and this and this. And I'm like, so then how much does the rule book cost? And she's like, oh, we don't have the rule book. This was like 2018, I think, at Origins. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, no, we're all totally out of stock.
They
I'm
had they had no concept they were going to be that successful.
Right. So then like the next year, or maybe I think it was the next year, I think it was 2019 Origins, I came back to the booth and I was like, oh, you got this rule book. Awesome. I'm like, so with the models, are like, we don't have any models.
No,
you know what I'm just
it's
like,
all sold out.
Sorry, yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And so they're finally at a point where like I can walk into pretty much any store and I can buy the stuff. So
it's
that's
so funny.
good.
Imagine being them though, where you spend 15 years in like we barely really sell anything.
Limbo.
We're attraction, we're in limbo.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden hit lightning with that first Kickstarter, and everyone wants your product, and everyone's like, it's kind. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of two things. It reminds me of the first release of X-Wing. When X-Wing was lightning in a bottle,
keep it up.
It could not keep stuff in stock.
Yeah.
Because it's based on a brand everyone knew and loved. It was on a super low shelf as far as
it was
just
$40
open the box.
$40 for the starter box originally, I think.
But also like just open it and play.
Yeah,
like the Christmas morning test was instantaneous. You know what I mean? It was 1, 2, 3 fun. You're having fun.
There's other than HeroClix, there was nothing else in the industry like that.
It was pop and play basically.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with the Catalyst stuff. Miniatures are pre-built, pop your tokens, open the rules and start playing. Like, and they did. I think that it's funny because they backed into Star Wars had movies. These guys had 40 years of books and novels and
that kind of jazz,
and like a video game, like
several video games and stuff.
An incredible cartoon that you've watched has aged incredibly poorly.
I bet.
But that level of brand awareness, they kind of backed into this big launch that I don't think they were expecting. So that would be number one. Number two would have been, if this was 2019, 18, I would have said the Shadespire box.
Sure.
Because that was a great Lost Leader product.
Yep.
The Age of Darkness Star Set, I think, is still a good Lost Leader product, but again, too complex.
Oh, by far, I think, yeah.
And those are the main brand ones. Without me getting into indie games, where I know of a million great 2-player starter sets, I can't think of other ones that would satisfy the criteria of lots of people know what this is and play it, so I can get someone to play with.
You're a big music fan.
Yep.
When you first started getting into music as a teenager, or even a bit younger, a tween or whatever, you were probably not getting into indie music right off the bat. You were listening to, just like everybody else, you listened to pop music for a while. Yeah. Like one of the first tapes that I ever got for Christmas was like Thriller by Michael Jackson, way back in the 80s and all that kind of stuff. And everybody's kind of wargaming experience has a tendency to sort of move in that same direction. Every once in a while, you get somebody who's like, oh, well, when I was 12, I discovered this band from Portland, Oregon called the Thermals, and they've been out, they haven't been making music in a decade, but that was the first tape I ever bought, or CD or whatever. That's pretty rare. It's usually popular music, and then eventually you start to find the indie stuff that you dig. And it's the same thing in this kind of industry where you start out and you're like, well, obviously you're going to get into 40K or something with a big name like Star Wars or whatever.
Because it's visible. It's above water.
Because it's visible, right? You know what it is.
It's not the iceberg underwater.
But then there are people that stay with that. There are people that stay with popular music their entire life, and that's totally fine. And then there are people that start to get into the smaller niche stuff and the things that really start to like scratch their particular itch. And so, I think it's the problem is that when the popular music of Warhammer or of Wargaming starts to be troublesome, then it's real hard to draw people into music, aka in this case, Wargaming. If I can keep the analogy going, but.
It's almost like it's not playing on the radio anymore.
Right.
That to me is
and the radio's not the radio anymore.
And the radio's not, or it only plays on the radio and no one can see it. Or it's only playing.
Everyone's listening to Spotify or whatever.
Well, it's only playing at. It's funny the bit of like it's only playing at UFC shows. You know what I mean? Because it's like the competitive guys get the noise.
Yeah.
And it feels like to me, one of the big things is they seem to be marketing based on engagement that they can prove, not the message they want to give.
Right. They know that people are reading articles about meta and that kind of stuff, but that isn't that's a bounce back message. That's a response. Right. They're responding to interest. Like, exactly.
Not saying this is what we love.
But that doesn't drive sales. Meta doesn't drive sales. To some degree it does when people are like, oh, this is the good unit, I should buy it. But then also if you've been doing this for a while, they're going to nerf it. Yep. So, and
imagine how confusing it is to a new person to look at that and go, I don't know why I care about any of this stuff.
Exactly.
And also this doesn't speak to me because I'm not this person.
Right.
I want to know, like why the product that I bought, this starter set with 2 armies in it, why does it never get talked about? Right. Why does never anyone show great versions of this painted or a battle report with that being featured in it? Or
and I think it's just because they've got so much new stuff constantly, they couldn't talk about everything. I think if they dialed back on how much new stuff came out, like when I first started in 40K, 5th edition, you were lucky if a codex came out for your army this year, like they would come out with like 3 codices a year, you know, and that was it. And so you'd be like, man, I think this is my year. It's going to be great. I'm not going to have to use this 4th edition or even 3rd edition codex anymore. It's going to be really cool. And that hasn't happened in a long time. And I'm not saying we want to go back to the old days, but I think it does need to slow down a bit because it does allow them to focus on like, this is why you would be interested in this, even though we came out with it 2 months ago. You still might be interested in it because it's still in stores. But now it's just focused on what's this week, what's this week, what's this week.
When we're in a state where the physical act of being a hobbyist takes longer than the release cycle takes to change the thing you're working on.
I hear constantly in the comments from people who are like, I worked on this army and then a new codex came out and then it was useless.
And it was well,
because I couldn't get it done in 2 years. I couldn't even get it done in a year.
I made a plan and then that plan was invalidated the next 6 months. And I think there's an inherent exhaustion that comes from that. And I think it's similar I think we're actually very prone to it sociologically.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the same thing that's coming from Marvel and it's the same thing that's coming from we're just overfed.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't have a chance to marinate. I think about my experience with the Horus Heresy. I was so excited for the Horus Heresy. I built this beautiful Raven Guard army. We went to the UK and talked about it. And then as I was like coming back here, I was like, I'm going to spend this whole summer playing the Horus Heresy game. It's really good. I'm really excited about it. The old design team worked on it. Everyone who started Horus Heresy armies with me that spring stopped working on them and jumped to the next thing.
Yeah.
6 months later, the next kill team thing or the next Warcry thing or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it got paved over by attention. And I was prone to it too. And then I didn't play a game of Horus Heresy for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was so excited about this, but it didn't get a chance to marinate. It didn't get a chance to land and be worked on and be loved.
I've always wanted to make a skit where a guy comes into the front of the shop and there's like some guys that have already got like the game X, whatever it is. And they're like, you really need to get into this. This is the new thing. You know, this is awesome. And it's great and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to go in the back and set up.
So he buys
and
some stuff, he leaves.
So then he talks to the store owner and stuff. He buys some stuff and then he walks to the back of the store and he's like, what's this? And I'm like, oh, this is game Y. This is really, you know, exactly. Yeah. And like, you know, that should be the way, that's not the way it should be, but that is the way it kind of is to some degree. And you're right. Not even within like different brands, but even within the single brands. That's why I love seeing stuff that indie folks do because they have a tendency to, if they're going to build an ecosystem where they're like, this is our game, they have a tendency to work on it slower, partially out of necessity. They just can't put out stuff like that.
It's a scale.
But it also allows the people that are interested in that kind of thing to be able to breathe a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that also part of that, though, too, to be perfectly honest, is if you can get a gaming group, a group of people, 3-4 people you'd like to play with, if you can all just decide this is the thing, you know what I mean? And just sort of, you can have so much more fun versus
really dig into it.
Than just constantly trying to keep up with anything. You can just go, like I know people that still play 3rd edition, 40K, you know, and they're having a great time with it. Now, are they getting any new stuff? Are they getting FAQs? No, but they're house ruling stuff. They're doing what they want and they're having a good time with it. And that's one of the things that I think that in my mind puts this above video gaming is that when they make a patch for the video game and the servers change, you can't play the old version anymore. But with this, you can play stuff that you've had for 20 years easily.
Yeah. Well, and then it's complete. I think there's actually some satisfaction when people collect older games. That's one of the reasons why I do it, is that you can actually have a complete collection now. Yeah. You can actually have the whole thing and you can enjoy it and appreciate it for what it is. And that's a Vinyl Records guy mentality of tabletop wargaming. And that's not really possible anymore. Like you couldn't have a complete collection of Warhammer 40,000. It's just not possible.
No.
Of any edition really, because it's bled over into itself so many times. That
I think that setting up what your definition of complete is, you know what I mean, is also important. And with something like 40K being an ecosystem that they constantly have to be able to wring money out of, that's a different story. But you could easily be like, I've got everything that we want for Warcry, or I've got everything that we want for Necromunda. And they might come out with something new, and we'll make a decision about whether we're going to add that to our repertoire or not. But
I think we're capable of that.
Sure.
I think that what happens is that a lot of people want the safety and security feeling of being told by the marketing what the right thing to have is.
When we
release, and those MetaWatch articles prove it to me because it's like, oh, I want to know what the best thing is for this.
Well, sure.
If that gets engagement, then that's...
When I was a kid, we didn't have a computer, and friends of ours did and stuff like that, you know, their families and whatever. I said to my dad, I'm like, why don't we get a computer? He's like, I'm waiting till they make the best one, and then we'll buy that one. I'm like, that's even as a kid, I'm like, that's not smart. I don't think it's a good idea.
No, we had the same IBM 386. While my friends were running like, Mac 2s and Mac 3s,
Sure, yeah.
full color and playing like old, like early Sierra like adventure games. And
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
and I was so jealous.
Oh yeah,
so jealous. I'm here playing Dig Dug like some kind of scumbo.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I didn't get a PC until I got to college, and then bought one for myself. And I bought like a 386 and went through all that kind of stuff. And then my dad would start to use it, and I'm like, come on. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think that like when Vince and I publish our games, the first one we published, we were like, hey, it's miniature agnostic. Use what miniatures you want. And the people would be like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But what miniatures am I supposed to use? And we're like, whatever you want. Demons can be anything. I'm like, yeah, that's really that. I agree. Yeah, but what should I be using though? So now whenever we publish a new game, the first thing we do, like literally the night that it launches, we also put out a blog post and say, here's a bunch of places you can go find stuff for Space Station Zero. Here's a bunch, that kind of stuff. And that helps. But there are people that are like, that want the permission. Exactly. And then there are people like me, when I look at a new, miniature agnostic game that I come across, and I come across it and I'm like, this is very cool. For me, the excitement is now I'm going to go figure out what miniatures to use. Or I'm going to kit bash, or I'm going to do that stuff. But that's another issue, I think, to some degree with the industry, is you've got people who want the almost plug and play, and you want the people, but you get that in computers and computer games too. There are the people who I want to play a PlayStation. I put the disc in and I go, and the other people who are like, I want to edit bat files. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think that's a generational thing too, where does your entertainment come from? Were you forced because you didn't have access to it to have it come out of you and you were interacting with it? I think that's the generation of the pen and paper RPG, the theater of the mind people. Versus the generation of entertainment was directed towards me from film and TV, from all of these sort of like tablet games and video games and stuff like that. So I think it's almost like a what are you used to? Like I don't think there's no value judgment there. It's just how did you interact with media and hobbies entertainment when you were forming your opinion of what that's supposed to be? And so getting it right and having that permission is going to feel more natural for someone who has always had their entertainment projected on them, as opposed to having it come out of them.
I think there are people that want to play in worlds, and then there are people who hate playing in someone else's world. And again, not a value judgment, but it's a situation of people who are like, love to read these books, and they love the stuff that comes out of these creators. And as creators, we should be happy about that for sure. But on the other hand, there are people who are like, no, I'm going to write my own thing because I can't live in somebody else's
corner of this universe.
Exactly.
I'm going to fill in the gaps. Yeah. So I think we're in an interesting place, because the last thing that I was going to ask you about the state of the industry thing is, what is your opinion of and I want to predicate this by saying, at this point, I think Games Workshop is its own licensing company. But what is your opinion of the fact that it is incredibly hard to find a product that isn't a branded product right now in the industry? That there are junior companies making their own products, but the vast majority of the big players, and I count Warmer as this now because they have diversified so much into video games and books and TV and media and stuff now, that they are a brand
breakfast cereal. I'm not supposed to talk about the breakfast cereal yet. Sorry.
You just broke our NDA. We're both busted. It's out. We're deleting this whole episode.
I think that, again, it comes down to, I don't want to say permission, but it comes down to, well, I could play this thing that I've never heard of. Or there's this Marvel thing, or this Star Wars thing, or this Star Trek thing, or this Game of Thrones thing, or whatever, Halo, all that kind of stuff. And I don't find myself usually too interested in licensed things myself. Now, that being said, I played the old Star Wars miniatures game, the pre-paints from Wizards of the Coast. I played that for quite a while, and that was sort of fun. Used to play that at the old comic shop because we didn't have a game shop in town yet. I do have a Legion army that's painted, and I'm waiting for my store owner friend to get his Rebels commission painted so that we can start playing this summer. I don't know. Vince and I have made the joke that we want to do a license game at some point, and we were trying to figure out how to get the license for Hell Comes to Frogtown.
There you go.
The old 80s
Roger
movie.
Corman, yeah, man.
Yeah, with Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
We think it's owned by Disney now, though, actually.
Probably.
We did the company that owned it, and now that company's owned by Disney. And we're like,
just United Living Dead. It's all free. He didn't get it copyrighted.
Exactly.
You can always United Living Dead.
Yeah.
Falls back on it.
But so, I don't know. the thing is that if it didn't sell, they wouldn't do it.
So here's the thing. It's all fast nickels.
Mm-hmm.
There's two problems with licensed products. One, they end.
Mm.
There's an edge of the sandbox. You can't make anything new for it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can only make what's inside the license.
That Star Wars miniature game, like they got to the point because they would put out 60 new, 60 new pre-painted things in those like random pack boxes every quarter, and they got to the point where they're just making stuff up.
It's why second edition X-Wing failed.
Yep.
You don't need another X-Wing that's
Right.
just in Poe Dameron colors.
Right.
I don't care about that. I already have X-Wings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just buying these cards to put next to the X-Wings I already have.
Right.
You hit a logical endpoint. So you're on a conveyor belt where you have to always pay your fees back to the
Yep.
licensee, the people that you're giving free money to.
Right.
And you have to hope you make enough money on top of that. So your product's intrinsically going to be more expensive because it's cost of production plus licensing.
Right.
And then you don't have any creative control.
Oh, yeah. You
and
constantly have to go back to the licensee and say, is this okay? Is this okay?
And you run out of rope eventually because you run out of things to make content about.
Right.
The bonus is you rent their customers. Their marketing is your marketing.
Sure.
Right. So you get to have their customers who Venn diagram over into having an interest into tabletop games.
They put out a new season of Mandalorian. You've got a bunch of Mandalorian content.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
But it's none of it makes a Games Workshop. And the big companies are engaging in this far more than the small companies.
Sure.
So there's no long-term possibility here because eventually people just have eaten their fill of a licensed product.
They're
like
trying
with
to
Marvel.
They're trying to cheat the runway.
Yeah.
Where like, GW's been doing this for 40 plus years, whereas these guys are like, well, we want a 40-year-old, IP as well. So we'll just work with these folks. Exactly.
We'll just buy one.
Yeah.
And to me, that's actually causing damage to the ecosystem because it's pulling money away from any of these junior companies becoming a major player, becoming an actual company.
Because they're not making enough profit necessarily because of how much they've got to pay back to the licensees.
That's right. And also it's just taking time and attention away from money that could be spent inside the community, if you will. Like I'm always thinking about how long can you keep your dollar away from Disney? How long can you keep your dollar away from these license holders? And keep it going to a Sean Sutter and keep it going to, somebody who's basically making something new and different that's their own. Right. Like, and that to me feels like like I don't want to put a value judgment on it because it's good business. Right. It's a good way of short-term making money.
It's good for short-term business.
Long-term, it's redirecting money outside of the ecosystem of this industry into the license holders.
Because if you get really, really into Star Wars because you played Legion for a while, or even Star Wars, like X-Wing.
Try selling X-Wing on the second-hand market right now. You can't.
Exactly. But the other thing, though, too, is that if at that point it just keeps, that's just more advertising for the next show on Disney that Star Wars puts out or whatever. And so it can get to the point where the person's like, I'm just having a better time watching the show than I am doing the thing. You know what I mean?
And I own enough miniatures.
Exactly.
Like, if I own tons of Legion miniatures, why do I want to buy these Shatterpoint miniatures?
Right.
If I own tons of Shatterpoint miniatures, why do I want to buy these Legion miniatures? It becomes self-cannibalizing.
Once in a great while, I still get together with a friend of mine and we still play X-Wing. We play 1.0. We just never bothered to upgrade.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's done.
Yeah, but it's just the two of us and it's fine. If I was to try to go into the shop and play X-Wing with other folks, I don't even know what version they're on, to be honest, right now. So
of course not.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. I've always wondered about licensing and thought, I see again the short term, but I do wonder because what's the licensed product that's been out for more than 10 years at this point?
There isn't one.
X-Wing. X-Wing is probably closest, but even that is barely I don't know a store owner who even wants to really carry it much anymore. Right? You know what I mean? Exactly.
And so if you're talking about this faith in the investment I have thing of bringing new customers in, all their experience is going to be if they've played X-Wing is, this was really popular for a while and then it was gone. And I had all this stuff that I ended up trying to get rid of.
This is why I love the miniature agnostic kind of mindset, and also being part of that miniature agnostic mindset is that I never look at a model as, well, if this game goes away, this model is useless.
No, of course not.
You know what I mean?
You've seen the warehouse.
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. But that's the thing is that you're in a situation where, you can, I like to call it like the buffet kind of stuff, because you can do a little bit of this and a little bit of this. You can play these games, and now you can take these two robots and put it over here and play this game.
Yeah, I was doing the Doomed with a bunch of Eden miniatures mixed with Dark Age miniatures mixed with like whatever, right? And
I think that's the longevity. It's obviously not huge business. Stockholders don't like it. I don't care. I think it's really interesting to people who have, again, it's not good for the long-term giant business, but I don't know that this I don't know that tabletop wargaming should be giant business.
I don't think it should.
Exactly.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think it should be. And I think that any kind of retraction that happens in the next while will hopefully allow some of those juniors to graduate into being mid-sized companies. I think
a little bit of
what I'd like to see, self-correcting. I'd love to see diverse options that aren't trying to be everything to everybody, that aren't trying to make a game that aren't trying to have a rank and flank game, a skirmish game, a fantasy game, a sci-fi game, a historical sci-fi game, a sports game, kitchen table competitive game. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to be everything to everybody.
Right.
Make a couple good games.
Yeah.
You don't need to fight in every single one of these weight classes. Just make the cool game that you like making.
Right.
And when that eventually grows to a certain size, make another game.
Yeah.
Like, just change and make another game.
Yeah.
And we have this thing where, because you do see things eventually run their course. Older IPs tend to run out of steam at some point because they just have too many releases and it's too many SKUs and it's too top heavy. And
we just saw that with Age of Sigmar.
We have to have retraction.
Yeah.
It has to happen. It's a logical retraction from the point of view of the 10 feet of wall space that you're giving them in a gaming store that needs to get turned over at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think we've answered any questions. We definitely had a very long conversation about where it's at. I do think that there is change brewing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just in a store yesterday here in town, and they had an entire wall full of 3D printed stuff because they've been 3D printing their own stuff there and selling it to people. And I don't think that's going away.
Nope.
And I don't think it should.
Nope.
You know, and so you know, I've had a lot of people go, I don't know why, your local stores don't just start 3D printing more. And in many situations, it's because it's usually a one-man operation. Yeah. And they are the same person who has to order, who has to clean the bathroom, who has to sell stuff, who has to close the store.
That's a whole other workflow.
Exactly.
You're now adding manufacturing to
But the stores that can do it,
sure.
I think that you're going to start seeing more and more of that.
Yep, I think that's going to be a new manufacturing point where people can create and then ship to stores without ever having to pack a UPS truck, and that's going to be a really interesting thing in the future.
Exactly.
I also think that as a species, we are sick of licensing. We are sick of every movie we go to see being based on, being a derivative of, or a remake of. We are getting sick of that, and I think that that's going to bleed out because if the A24 movie streams have taught me anything, is we are desperate for original media.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we are desperate for things that don't look like something we've seen before, and we're not getting it in a lot of places.
Well, you just mentioned the Doomed. You know, I mean, like there's and Steel Rift. We were talking earlier about I'm working on my second Steel Rift mode. I mean, like all these different things. The other thing I find too is that I don't personally want too much lore. I want to be given a framework. I want to be given a jumping off point and say, this is the cool thing. Now you come up with some of this stuff. Go play in it. And that's what I want to see too. And I think that the licensing comes with its own entire, lore and all that kind of stuff. And obviously GW is super incredibly heavy into it. But I think that we are going to see a bit of a correction where you're going to see people who I hope are just making games that are more fun and don't necessarily lean so much on the marketing of it and the lore of it and getting a proper IP that you have to pay a whole bunch of money for. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go, guys. We talked about where the industry's currently at. It sounds like we're in the same level of chaos as everything else.
Exactly.
It's too expensive. It seems directionless and without purpose. And much like our media, film, TV, and everything else, a lot of it's based on someone else's original idea that we came up with 40 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. And a spreadsheet. And then the rest of it's being done by money people that don't understand what the actual thing is because they can find their quants. If you want to know what a quant is, don't look it up. Don't look up KPIs either. Don't look up KPIs and quants because that's a whole ass reason for decisions being made that you don't want to know about. Right.
So thanks for coming in, man.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
And I hope I get you in again. I'll see you at whatever the next show is we both bump into each other at.
Probably Adepticon next year.
Yeah. When's your game launching? Do some pluggies. What's your pluggy that you're? When can we see the next Snarling Badger creation?
It should be end of this month, end of May.
Hell yeah,
the 24th. Yeah.
Wow, that's our long weekend. That's the Queen's birthday.
It's also Memorial Day over in our states. Yeah, it's weird.
That's our song. 24th of May is the Queen's birthday. For the holiday, we'll run away. So go check it out. Obviously, it'll be linked on the Snarling Badger page, the blog.
All over.
It'll probably be on Wargames Vault.
Yeah, it'll be on Wargames Vault. That's where we're doing it through.
And see up there.
So Vince will talk about it. I'll talk about it. So you can see it on our channels as well.
What's this one about?
We haven't really said yet? It's still sort of secret. Dark fantasy.
Dark fantasy.
Whoa. Yeah. And I'm really happy with the way that it looks. I mean, like especially, and the game itself is very cool. Don't get me wrong, but like after I got back from Denmark at Army Painter, I basically had 12 days to lay the entire thing out, and it's a little shorter than the last two games, but it's longer than our first game. But still, that was a
lot
harsh.
Of work in 12 days.
It was a lot of work in 12 days. Yeah. But we wanted to hit May 1st to get it sent off so that we'd have time and all that kind of stuff and everything. And I got a UPS thing that said the proof should probably land at home today, so I won't see it till I get back tomorrow to the States. But yeah, I'm really happy with the way it's turning out.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Sweet. So like 3 weeks, you guys are gonna get to see some new Snarling Badger, Vince Ventrella, and Adam Loper like creations.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see it myself. Sweet.
Yeah.
All right, man. All right, bye everybody.